Welcome to the Jeremiah Show. Despite childhood trauma and tragedy, Kai Martin has never given up, rising from devastation to rebuild her life over and over again in this inspiring story of strength and resilience. It's Holly LaBarbera's debut novel, All I Know. Kai sees her life as a series of concentric circles. Her twin brother, Kade, occupying the center sphere with her, their parents surrounding them in the next, and the Tyler family is in the outer loop. A connection Kai plans to make official by someday marrying Josh Tyler. The Martins and the Tylers share memorable times together, but under the surface, they are two dysfunctional families struggling with alcoholism, depression, and abuse, all of which lead to a horrifying event that knocks Kai off her axis and makes her doubt everything she thought she knew. Josh is there through it all, and Kai eventually gets the romance she dreamed of, embarking on a life of travel and adventure with the boy she always loved. Yet reality is more complicated than any childhood fantasy. And when painful family patterns are reenacted between them, Kai must decide how much of herself she is willing to sacrifice for Josh. Ultimately, Kai must confront the heartbreaking truth that as much as we try to help the people we love, we can only truly save ourselves. Welcome, Holly.
Thank you. I'm glad to be
Welcome,
here.
welcome to the show. You have been very patient as I got nailed by a sickness, and we've had to reschedule. And it gave me time to read your book. It gave me time to anticipate this interview, and I'm so happy that you stuck through it and stuck with me. And here you are. Most of all, though, congratulations on publishing your first novel. How are you feeling right now? It's got to be just an incredible feeling.
It is. I'm feeling a lot of things. I'm very grateful. I'm very excited, a little nervous, just to see what happens from here, but just trying to take it all in and enjoy the moment as much as I can.
An incredible accomplishment. It's just it must feel great. And it's the book is out on June 11th, coming up here. You're about a week away. I bet you're are you marking that calendar one by one by one,
I am.
marking those days
The
off.
nerves and the excitement level are playing off each other as the days count down. So yeah.
Well, I told you before we started, and I want to say it here publicly, that you are an incredible writer. It really is a great first novel. It's just a great novel. It's a great story,
Thank you.
and the writing is really superb. Congratulations again.
Thank
So,
you.
All I Know
Mhm.
began as a love story for you as a writer,
Mhm.
but as you explored the love story between Kai and Josh, a deeper human story began to unfold on the pages,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And through Kai and Josh, you began to explore the complexities of romantic relationships, as well as those complexities within families and friendships. And the novel shows us, the story tells us that love comes in many forms, including choosing to love oneself.
Mhm.
So, my question is, why do you suppose that the story opened up to you in that way? How did where you first began to approach, and you thought you knew where it was going? It started to open up in a different way. The narrative led you into this great exploration, human condition, human emotions, and human relationships. Did you have any other choice to follow it, or did it lead you?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely led me a bit. So yeah, I would say I didn't have a choice. I think I love a good love story. I'm a sucker for a good love story. And so I think that's just naturally where I started because I love that, but also, um, my day job is I'm a psychotherapist. And so I'm just constantly in the midst of relationships, not just romantic relationships. And so it all weaves together. And again, the scenes I wrote first were mostly all Josh and Kai scenes at the beginning. And then as I was like, okay, I got to make more of this story, kind of zooming out to the families and Kai's friendships. And then kind of, I guess, zooming a little bit back in on Kai herself as like really the main. In my head at first, it was Kai and Josh's story, but then I was like, no, this is Kai's story. Josh is a big part of it, but it's really her story.
Yeah, it really is her story and her perspective on these families and the things that uh, define us
Hmm.
and define us. We think they define us, but maybe they don't, and maybe that's just a story we've told ourselves. Who? Let's talk about the Martin and the Tyler families in the novel. Can you
Sure.
describe them to who are they? What is their relationship? How are they different? How are they alike?
Hmm. Um, well, the kind of the bond between the families starts with the dads that met when they're in the Peace Corps, which I know you've met my dad, and or at least virtually. And so he's
I
not
know
at
him.
all, my
We're
dad is not
pals.
what? Yeah, you're
I said
pals.
I think I know him. We're pals.
Uh-huh.
The
Uh-huh.
most interesting man in the world is what I call him.
He is, yeah. And so that friendship, my dad did have a friend like that, and we were family friends with those friends. That is the absolute only similarity between those families and these families. But so the dads were friends first. And so Kai's known Josh her whole life, and they are fun loving. They make a lot of great memories together as families. They have a lot of fun together. They have a lot of traditions together. But there's a lot of messed up stuff going on under the surface with these families, and sometimes not even so far under the surface. It pretty much bubbles up periodically. Um, the dads are both alcoholics. And Josh's family, there's some abuse. Kai's family, I would say, is more neglect by the dad than abuse, but then also the Tyler family, there's 4 kids, 3 boys and a girl. And in Kai's family, she has a twin brother, Kade. And so the 6 kids interact in a certain way also that shapes them.
So you mentioned just a moment ago that you're an accomplished psychotherapist and a professor. You received your master's in counseling psychology from Santa Clara University, and you're also a currently there a adjunct professor.
Mhm.
You all on top of all that, you own your own psychotherapy practice, and
Mhm.
you spend your days in various relationships like those of the Martin and the Tyler families. I
Yeah.
was reading a little bit about you, and is it true? I found this fascinating. He said, "Is it true that a person who grew up with an addicted parent typically ends up with a partner who is similarly problematic as a way of reenacting their dysfunctional patterns as a form of unconscious self sabotage?" So,
Well,
is that
I'm going to interrupt. I don't actually think it's unconscious self-sabotage. I think up until then, yes. I think that it often, again, nothing is always, but it often happens that if someone with whatever, whether it's addiction or neglect or depression or what these wounds that we have in childhood, we tend to end up with partners that have the potential to re-wound us in those same ways. But my belief, and this is a lot of, I mean, this is not my unique belief, it's not an original idea, but my belief is that we're unconsciously attracted to those people to try to heal those wounds. So if I am with someone who drinks a lot, but then they give that up and take care of me, and, we can maybe wound that heal. So I think the idea is we're used to it, we're drawn to it, but with the hope that we can solve that for ourselves, fix that in ourselves, heal ourselves. It's just that often our unconscious picks someone so well that they're not going to actually heal us. They're going to cause the same wounds more. So, but I think that the point is this hopeful unconscious thought of trying to heal ourselves.
Yeah, that it's the choice is an attempt to heal, and
Yeah.
that hoping that the partner will do something different, like right. That's what you said
Yeah.
to end up
Mhm.
healing them. I think that's really profound and made me stop and think. Can you explain that to me in terms of the main character in your book?
Yeah.
How
So,
is Kai working through that? How is that?
right. For Kai, um, I'm trying to think how to do it without too much spoiler.
Right, right. Well,
There's a
you can say pass if you don't want me to give out too much.
No, I think that
I think
there are times when Kai is in kind of this codependent and mesh relationship with Josh, and not only with Josh, but with Josh. And so she is trying to get something that she didn't get from her dad, I guess. And it plays out in a certain way. But I guess I'm going to be cagey a little bit on that because I don't want to give too much away. But
yeah, please don't. Please tell me. I don't want to ruin it for anybody. I was interested in the name Kai. I mean, I've heard it quite a bit, and I looked up what it means. It says keeper of the keys, and
oh, that's interesting. So that wasn't the definite. So
oh,
I
that's what
chose.
I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Was the name intentional to the story?
It was, but not, I think this is true with names, right? There's lots of different definitions. So Kai is born in Hawaii. And I wanted a name that was a Hawaii, thinking her parents chose it because they were living in Hawaii at the time. And so I was looking at Hawaiian names, and Kai was a name that meant water, or that was linked to the water. And Kai talks throughout the book, there's some references to her being, there's a lot of scenes with her with the water, and the water is very meaningful to her, as it is to a lot of people. I think water can be very healing and soothing for people, and it's a meaningful thing for Kai, and so I chose her name to kind of reflect that.
This is a coming of age story for Kai, isn't it?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
No, I'm thinking ahead, like trying to think like you. I wanted to ask what is Kai's childhood trauma, but I don't know if do you want the reader to wait and find that out for themselves?
Well, I think there's a series of traumas. I think the main big trauma, yes, the reader needs to wait and see what that is going to be. But I think there's a smaller trauma, like Kai wants things from her dad, and her brother really wants things from their dad that neither of them get. And it's a bit more painful for Kade than for Kai, but Kade is her brother. But so I'm not sure that reaches the level of trauma that later things do, but it is very painful to her. And her brother has some mental health challenges, and that is very painful for her as well.
I was talking to an actor the other day, and they were comparing, talking about how when they take on a role and they become that role, that whatever trauma or whatever the character is going through, it takes a little while for that to wash off after the story is finished. And I was thinking about you, these traumas that she goes through. Was it hard to write Kai's
Mhm.
trauma? Does that character become a part of you in a way, even if it's not you or based on anything you know, but it starts to feed to you? And how do you feel as the author? Is it hard to write those things, and do you feel it?
Well, I definitely feel it. I definitely feel it. Like I said, I'm a therapist, so I have a little craziness in my mind that it is not, I don't think pathological, but I think it is a creative thing that, like, they feel alive in my brain. Like Kai and Josh feel like they're
Yeah.
living in my head. And I mean, when I was writing it, for sure, when I was revising, but even now that I've just been immersing myself in this book again for the last couple months, and so they're very alive. They feel I mean, I know they're not real, but they feel very alive in my head. Um, and and I will say, I mean, it's a little, I don't know if it's narcissistic or what, but reading, it makes me cry. When I wrote parts of this book, I was crying. When I read it again, I was crying. When I revise it, I would cry. I'm like, okay, it's pretend and you made it up. But so it is emotional to me and I definitely feel it. I don't know that it sticks with me in that same way because of the fact that like my training for being a therapist. So this is a part of what I do every day is I like sit with stories like this every day and have to like have these processes to kind of let it go at the end of my day so that I can go home and eat dinner with my family. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's interesting that you brought that up because that was one of my questions that I wanted to ask you. I didn't write it down, but I thought if we got to it, and you just opened the door for us right there. Um, your training as a psychotherapist, your training and your everyday life, you're hearing these stories. Are you able to step back and look at, at yourself and step out of the situation? These situations of these characters that you're creating, they do come to life. I mean, I wouldn't say they are life, in the
Yeah.
minds of
Yeah.
the readers and in your mind, and
Mhm.
in some weird way, they do have life. And are you able to actually step back with your training and look at the character with that perspective, or even in your own situations, you are able to?
I mean, I try to, I think that there's
It
times
must be hard.
it is hard. And there's times with my clients that I like all the things I practice don't work and they stick with me more than I would like or than is entirely healthy, I guess. But but you have to care enough in the room with clients and in on the page with my characters. You have to care enough that you really are genuinely showing up. Like you have to reach that kind of vulnerable place to really show up and then still be able to like, okay, that's not me, that's them. And so it is a little tricky. It takes practice. I don't always nail it exactly, but I know when I was writing the book, there was a lot of nights that I would just be laying there like, oh, what's going on with Josh and Kai? Like, what are they doing? And like thinking a lot about them. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, I find as I talk to writers, that's not uncommon. It's kind of, they kind of just really do get in there and they're hard to let go of. Mhm.
Kai gets she gets knocked down and she gets up and then she gets up again and she gets up again after many ups and downs and knockdowns. Was it with the perspective that you have in your day job, but also as a writer and your life, taking your life perspective in, was it hard for, or I guess it should say, how easy was it to come up with the reasons for her to get up again?
Mhm. Yeah, that I think I'm not sure how hard it didn't feel super hard to have that because I think a lot of my perspective on the world is very hopeful. Not all the time, obviously, but I do, I see it every day. Like there's people that come in and I hear a story and I'm like, oh, like no way. Like this is, but then they do bounce back and go on to thrive and live amazing lives. And so I see that a lot and I do believe in people's capacity to rise above things. So I also though because I do see it and I pay attention to that, I do think I was very deliberate about giving Kai some of those resiliency factors that I think are help people. I give her a very good mom. I think, I mean, she's not a perfect mom, but she is this idea of a good enough mother. I love Kai's mom in the book. And so I set her up with a good mom so that because I do think that helps people bounce back. And her friends because the people who I see struggle the most are lonely and isolated people and so I wanted her to have some smart sassy friends to help her out and I think she
Yeah,
does.
and I guess that was actually my question more, as you spoke, is that you have the answers through your training, and as an author though, and your character is going through so much, and you've got to write how that character comes to the realization, and she comes to different terms on her own.
Mhm.
I guess that was more of the question: is how hard it is it to like hold back and not and make it real. Don't you can't give her everything because not many people have those skills to navigate the different things in their daily life that traumatize them or affect them or challenge them. But you answered it. But that was
Yeah. Well, and I think that Kai doesn't know all that as she's
right.
going along, right?
That's
Like,
what I mean. It must be hard
yeah.
not to give that, but you know what I mean?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
instinctively you're trained to write those scenes the way, here's how you fix how she fixed it, but in the real life. And it comes across really very real.
Thank you.
So when do the sins, because we all use these different things growing up to define us in a way and to also hold us back and to also as an excuse. When do you think an adult life that this or teenage life that sins of the family expire and your own personal life decisions become your own, meaning I can't keep relying on that issue my parents had and that I grew up within. I've got to take ownership on my own. When do you think that expires? Do you think people get that, or is it very few do realize that they can leave that behind and work on themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's an age number really for that. I think some people do, some people don't. I think there's a part in the book that when Kai's mom is giving her a little life lesson, and she talks about reasons being different than excuses. And I think that's very true. I think like it's helpful to uncover reasons and to understand why you're doing things you're doing and have an awareness of whatever things that have happened to you that got you where you
Mhm.
were and informed your life, like your map of the world, basically. But those are just reasons, and you like keeping those as excuses just keeps you stuck, like, oh, I
Mhm.
couldn't do that because this thing happened to me. That if you look at it that way, it keeps you stuck. But if you can look at it and say, like, oh, okay, this thing happened to me, how does that impact how I move through the world? And is that what I want? Or do I still need that? Or can I heal from that and move forward with that? And I think for some people that happens when they're 15, and for some people it's 40, and for some people it's never. So um,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. How often do you see that a person who's grown up, let's say we use the alcoholism and maybe an alcoholic father or mother, why do you think that we turn to a lover, to somebody that we fall in love with, or um, we look to them as an escape and hope that they can fix us, but it doesn't really fix us, does it? Why do you think that's a human emotion? Do through your exploration of conversations with people, have you come to any conclusions?
Well, I think we think it's going to be easier, right? If somebody else can fix us, cool, then
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to do it myself. Um, and I think that's the easy answer, is that it's too hard. It's too hard to look at it ourselves and try to do it ourselves. And I think also on the flip side of that, trying to fix other people can be similar. Like, let me I can see your problems, I can fix that. And again, that looking inward is harder.
Right. And not look at yourself. It gives you an excuse to
Yeah,
distract you. Right.
right. Yeah.
Distraction. It feels good. What drew you to explore they're deep, these conditions, these circumstances as a writer? I know that you do it in your life, but what draws you to explore them as a writer? Is there?
Well, I think relationships and how people interact with each other is pretty much the predominant thing that interests me in my life. I mean, that's the TV shows I watch, the movies I watch, the books I read. Um, when I'm talking with people, that's what I like to talk about. So I just think um, And I think anything with easy answers and simple stuff is doesn't really interest me. So I'm always drawn to kind of, ooh, that sounds really complicated. And so yeah, I just think those relationships and all different. Like I said in the book, I mean, I think sibling relationships are super interesting to me. And so just all of that I find fascinating. And I also I think it's fascinating too, because each relationship is entirely unique and yet also is just like every other relationship. So it's that paradox of like that common humanity, but also the very individuality. And I just think that's so cool.
Well, you are good at putting the words down and making it a very interesting story. My special guest today, I'm talking to her right now, Holly C. La Barbera. Holly C. La Barbera's debut novels out on June 11th. It's called All I Know. It's published by Buckberg Mountain Books. You can go to hollyclabarbera.com. I'm going to spell it for you. Holly, Holly, CLABARBERA.com. Holly C. LaBarbera.com. You can pick up a copy online. You can also go to bookshop.org. The book launch is coming up June 11th, 7 p.m. Banter Bookshop, Fremont. You can register at banterbookshop.com/events. You can find Holly again on her website, hollyclabarbera.com, or on Instagram, Holly Tell. Holly tells a tale. That's a clever little that's a clever handle there. I like that. HOLLYTELLSATALE. And we will be back in a moment. We're talking about All I Know, the debut novel from Holly C. La Barbera. Great conversation. Stay with us. We'll be right back.